Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this week's video, I'm going to be going through part 2 of my first year Masters of Architecture project, and in this case, I'm going to be going through the outline design element of the scheme. So continuing on from the outline brief element of the project, my outline design scheme is titled Amphibious Master Plan Strategy. And in this portfolio, I've included my project introduction, mapping analysis and exploration, my individual strategy, which breaks down into several interventions, which I'll be going through and explaining, and finally some maps and studio tasks in the appendix, which I included to show some additional work that was done during the year, which contributes towards the project. For my narrative, I've stated that for the architectural design strategy project, I have developed a proposal that operates along the River Tiber, having a scheme which pushes this narrative of an amphibious city. To have architecture bridge the gap between land and water is crucial, especially in the coming years, as Rome is targeted as one of the major cities in Europe that will be greatly impacted by the effects of flooding. The city must act now to provide systems and strategies along the edges of the River Tiber in order to mitigate the impacts of flooding, alongside the many other climate emergencies. As we push into a new realm of architecture which focuses more on resilience, adaptability, and working with the environment, the Amphibious Master Plan Strategy project aims to meet these objectives and work to create a multifaceted Rome for now and the future. This overview of Rome presents the initial mapping of the city and the identification of some of the city's most important landmarks that exist within. Using patterns to identify these zones and the key landmarks within them, I'm then able to provide a photo to show each one. In the creation of the transport analysis map, I provide a visual aid to support the understanding of the different methods of transportation in the city of Rome. So as you can see, I've included metro lines, the train station, bus routes, and bike trail zones. For the circulation heat map, I wanted to represent the data in a more graphic way. Therefore, by understanding data from Google, I was able to see where the hotspots are within the city centre to then graphically show that. As the areas with greater thickness and density show where there's greater traffic influx. And they were often located around monuments such as the Fontana di Discuri and the Altar della Patria and the Colosseum. This analytical map presents us with the landmarks of Rome identified on the left with their corresponding visual. The map has been integrated to show the direct location of these landmarks and to illustrate how close they are to one another. The places of worship map identifies churches, synagogues, and mosques within and around the River Tiber and the city of Rome. And through this, the size of the marking actually represents the level of significance, as shown through the greater importance of St. Peter's on the left of the page. For the hydrological analysis of Rome, I created this map to identify the aqueducts that run through the given areas of the city, in addition to illustrating the River Tiber and the subsidiary streams of water that come off the river. Through this, not only did I gain a greater understanding of the scale and magnitude of the hydrological elements within Rome, but also the historical importance and value of the river, aqueducts, and streams. The flooding analysis map shows which areas of the city are more affected by the impacts of floods, and in addition to highlighting the flood risk zones, this map also provides information on the surface level of the city, from which we can then use both sets of data to determine which areas are most at risk. This is just some additional stats on data that I used to assist me in the research phase before moving on to the design element of the project. And the first collage presents an alternative mode of connection for the city of Rome, delving deep into this narrative of the River Tiber becoming over-flooded and the impact that this will have on the citizens of Rome. I created a collage response to suggest how a new installment could provide a new way of life along and in the river. And this collage shows how I've integrated the original painting of the ruin by the Tiber Island and placed a destructive module that acts as a bridge, yet also houses a program within, using the notion of the ruins to determine the visuals. I titled this collage Veins of the Tiber, and it shows how the Tiber Island has had the new elements from the collage create the effect of it growing and evolving. With features of the original site remaining, the new insertion shows aspects of a postmodern, futuristic continuation of the original architecture. And when producing this collage, I wanted to envision an initial concept for how people could circulate in and around the river should the water levels rise. This is what led me to create a folding form to wrap around the edge of the river, creating different volumes and typologies. The collage expands my ideology for what could be inserted as a strategy. In this collage, I wanted to create a structure that exerts power, authority, and pride by having the main element branch off into paths and smaller bridges which lead to it. It provides further exploration of the river and how the notion of streams from the hydrological environment is being used as a tool for architectural significance. In comparison to the first collage I showed you, the evolution of the Tiber shows how in future years the original structure of the installment could have elements growing from it, using the work of Lebbeus Woods and how he explores the beauty of architecture in existing ruins. I wanted to merge the work of Woods to my collage to create an interesting concept, to be honest, that could further develop in future projects. And the final urban collage shows many of the previous collages all combined into one conceptual scheme. By overlaying and overlapping the elements onto the original perspective of the city, it provides an initial vision of what could be further developed. This page shows my urban strategy for the project, as my initial concepts include water wheels, air refreshing systems, water pumping stations, urban beaches, biodiversity zones, floating pools, and an activity platform. The urban strategy on the left shows the installation of the urban activities and systems that will be occurring along the edge and within the River Tiber. Alongside these, I've also presented the urban collages I made to place them into context as to where they are situated within the given site for my architectural strategy proposal. Now I'm going to go through the precedents that inspired me for the strategies I want to implement in my project, and through analysing the Low Carbon Exhibition Centre by Plasma Studio, I was able to identify certain factors such as the ways in which the development uses and integrates itself with the natural surrounding in order to gain as much environmental benefits as possible. The Izmir University of Economy scheme provides a clear hierarchy and orientation, as well as give identity to the individual parts, while fostering change encounters and a vibrant communal life. Through stressing the importance of community and having civilians, residents of Rome and visitors all interacting together, I aim to use aspects of this project and this precedent for future use. The flowing gardens bring a connection between land and water. The physical connection which runs through the cityscape makes an evident attempt for citizens to explore and can be interpreted as a node of connection and focal point for the city. By ensuring all aspects of the surrounding environment are treated and well maintained, whilst the scheme operates at its given site, it allows a further force of regeneration and sustainable resilience to be present. These attributes will be carried across, and although the scale differs between this project and my project, I feel like the purpose and sentiment behind the scheme relate strongly to my project. In this visual, I've illustrated where each strategy will be located along the River Tiber, and through this we can begin to see a system of mechanisms all working together. This page also includes a site section of the River Tiber at all bridges along the route, thereby kind of providing me with this essential information of the depth of the river in those areas for which strategies I can then place there. Here I've explained each of the urban activities in greater detail and as to why I've selected them for the scheme. And by doing some quick analysis on case studies relating to the urban systems, I wanted to also include in the project. It also gives me that kind of this understanding of seeing how existing projects are functioning in the world and how I can adapt and modify them to meet the needs of my scheme through the site and the objectives that I'm working with and towards. So intervention one presents us with the water wheel strategy that would be implemented in order to transport water from one area of the river to another. And this is due to the risks brought by heavy rain to the city, in addition to the future of the city, as it's targeted to be at threat to heavy flooding in the next 30 to 50 years. The collage of the intervention on the left presents the water wheel located in front of the Castel San Angelo, from which St. Peter's is visible in the background. Intervention 2 shows us the insertion of urban beaches on either side of the River Tiber, and through this strategy of working with the river, it enables citizens to make greater use of the space available, in addition to establishing a better relationship between land and water. By building upon the existing edges of the river, the city could see greater development starting from within and then expanding and extending through the city. Through exploring the amphibious strategy of working with land and water, it's vital for the scheme to work against the impacts and effects of flooding. Therefore, one of the tools that I've installed within the project is the method of folding. Through exploring the work of Gary and the Biomuseum, the building explores the biological systems of Panama and creates a geological link between North and South America. By applying the methods of folding, it also allows the urban beach to work in response to the typology of the river, as shown above. Intervention 3 is the biodiversity zone within the overall scheme. So through this, the exploration of this project and working along the river, it's become more evident to me that this project must factor in and consider the wider environmental aspects of the urban strategy. This led me to provide an intervention which works with nature and the vision of a human and wildlife interconnected environment. And through this, the collage on the left illustrates this possible vision for what the edge of the river Tiber could encompass. It's actually quite interesting because the project that I'm working on now in second year and final year masters really works with like the ecology, biodiversity and environmental factors and how the relationship between humans and nature can come together. So by kind of subconsciously going through this in first year, it gives me a greater foundation to work with. And the addition of an activity platform presents you with Intervention 4. Through analysing the River Tiber and implementing the previous strategies, I wanted to further explore the notion of architecture being the bonding form that connects the citizens of Rome to their historic and significant river. By creating a space that can be used for leisure purposes such as events, meetings, or even as a node of connection, the activity platform presents a greater addition of spatial design, especially when effects of overflooding will impact and bring greater risk to the surrounding land. I've included some research on an existing project that relates to the fourth intervention of the activity platform, and through analysing the floating art pavilion, I've been able to gain a greater understanding of the ways in which the architectural form of the intervention can create a symbiotic connection between the land and the water. Therefore, having the citizens of Rome feel at one with the city when experiencing the space. Working with the water as the platform floats on the surface, this precedent has opened up the possibilities for what structures could be implemented along the river when progressing the project. And the fifth and final intervention that will be occurring along the river for my urban strategy are floating pools. By using them to suck the water from the River Tiber during floods and heavy rainfall, it will allow greater support to the water table and to control the level of water in the river. In addition to this, they are pools through which members of the public are able to use for their leisure, especially during the summer periods, which is analysed in the topographical and temperature map in the appendix, which highlights the high temperatures the city of Rome faces in July. And again, some more precedents for this intervention. The Thames Bath precedent allows me to understand how connections between the close urban fabric and the river can have greater impact on the city for long-term growth. By implementing a strategy close to the edge of the river with a function for leisure, it also opens up the possibility for the public to adapt and evolve the space depending on their needs in the future, providing a resilient and adaptive strategy for the city of Rome. Through similar methods of design ideology, I'll be implementing the floating pools to create and provide a greater urban method of bringing citizens of Rome and the public to form a greater relationship with the river. And by this, it allows the city to reunite with one of the most historic elements. And I'd like to finish up part 2 of my Master's Architecture Portfolio Review by showing you some of the work in the appendix section. So this is mainly mapping from the research section of the project and starting with a map of the carbon emissions in Italy. And by analysing the carbon emissions of Italy, I'm able to identify the cities within the country that are greatly affected. And this diagrammic map that you see on the screen now illustrates the thicker and denser the lines, the more the input of deep CO2. The map also identifies where rich emissions of CO2 are located, the location of geothermal wells, and the areas that have CO2-rich groundwater. This map was created to gain a greater understanding of the average monthly temperature in July of Italy, in addition to the topography of the country. This macro-scale analytical map further allows me to then understand Rome's contextual characteristic when compared to its neighbouring cities. Through gaining data on the midsummer period, I can then later push my initiative to work towards factors such as climate change and sea level. Identifying the areas within Rome, within the city of Rome, through this we can see that it's not the clearest of maps for representing and showing what I want to explain. However, it's all about process and testing things out. And although this was kind of an unsuccessful attempt, an unsuccessful way of representing and showing what I want to explain, however, the way that the data is kind of shown, my tutor insisted on it being kind of included to show the level of development I went through this year, which I quite liked. And I think it goes back to being like not throwing away all of this process work that we've done, all this process work that I've done and that you'll be doing in your projects. Keep it in the appendix section. It's a part of the project. It's not something that you spent a lot of time doing and now that it's irrelevant you have to chuck it away. Keep these things in because these add towards the overall research that you've done and can kind of without you knowing, contribute towards the final outcome in a way too. And these abstract maps and visuals were also created in the beginning of the project and gave me kind of a starting point to then feed directly into studying and researching my site. And here are some more of those as well. And by finishing up with some studio weekly tasks we did, in which this one highlights the theme of political architecture. The next one, here we go, yeah, this collage shows architectural oddities and further explores into uncommon styles of architecture through a biological sense, and how growth through building layers on top of existing structures could be a part of sustainable future through design. The Dark Ecologies collage, which I explored into the term of Anthropocene, which means that the particular period of time the Earth is in is characterized by human domination, and therefore the creations and ruins are all a result of the actions of people on the planet. And finally, a collage which you've seen already in this portfolio, which derived originally from a studio task I did, and it consisted of me putting forward an alternative urban vision using a combination of collage and photo montage as a tool to activate static and solidified situations. Don't know why it froze. I think the page froze. I was back. And kind of the real image of Rome combined with the new urban and architectural elements to show a radical transformation and challenge to the urban condition of the site. So this is something that we did in studio. This was something that was inspired by our tutors asking us to produce all of these collages every week, and to kind of take all the teachings and the learnings that we had throughout the week and in our own time and create visual representations of that. It's all easy going to tutorials and having things in our minds and things that we can say to our tutors and talk, but putting things into context, creating physical things, creating digital products that we can then take to studio to then talk about. These are the things that are gonna not only support us, but also help us develop as designers, especially during architecture school. The more we do, the more feedback we get. And lots of people are put off by this, and I think this is something that needs to be pushed more in architecture schools, and not to deter students and not to kind of bury them with such a high workload, but to encourage them that the more you're doing, the more process and development you're doing is for your benefit as a designer, as a critical thinker, and as a creative thinker. So with that being said, this is the second part of my first year Masters of Architecture project. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed going through it and listening, and hopefully it brought you some added value and any tips and tricks that you can use for your projects. So that's part 2 of my first year Masters of Architecture project, and in next week's video I'm going to be going through the final design project portfolio, and I hope it shows a great combination of how part 1 and part 2 influenced the final scheme that I came up with. Thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.